America has a most enduring myth, and policing is inherently conservative and authoritarian as an institution. Now, you remember Tyree Nichols was killed by the Memphis police back in early January. Now, of course, I don't have cable, so I wouldn't know about this until the story came out. He was unarmed and innocent. Basically, the police smashed him like a human pinata. His crime? Being black in America and encountering that county's police. Tyree's family will always remember him. His friends and neighbors will remember him. The black community as a whole in Memphis will always remember him. And black America as a whole will always remember him too. Now, the police who brutally beat him to death will likely remember him as well. But it has been only 7 weeks, and predominantly the white America as a whole has already forgotten about Tyree Nichols. Now, black people's pain and suffering and death are background noise in America. It's a type of constant that at a certain point it's no longer being noticed. Now, moreover, black people's pain, suffering, and trauma are a type of a social glue that holds together the American society as a whole. Now, black people's pain, suffering, and trauma mark the boundaries of white and black citizenship. It delineates who can be targeted for violence by the police with general impunity and who is largely protected from the grip of the state. In that way, being black in America means experiencing a type of existential dread, fear, and terror that white people, by definition, never experience themselves, basically. Now how was Tyree Nichols and all of the many other innocent black and brown people who have been murdered by the country's police and law enforcement erased so quickly from the white public imagination? Now, it's an entire political, economic, and cultural machinery in America that is dedicated to laundering almost quite literally the reputations of the country's police and law enforcement. Now the result, the propaganda. It's basically to make America's police and other law enforcement immune as an institution from suffering any substantial and enduring negative consequences when they abuse the public, and especially if the people are being targeted, especially if the people that they are targeting are black, brown, poor, mentally ill, immigrants, or members of other marginalized groups. Now, the culture consists of all the things that a people as a whole in a given society do without thinking much, they do without thinking or much reflection because it is deemed to be normal. In this framework, propaganda is a cultural force that is so omnipresent that most people in America can recite its elements without much effort. The vast majority of police are good and hardworking, and they want to protect and serve the public. It is only a few bad apples who abuse the public. Most cops are good people. Now, most police use violence as a last resort. If you do what the police tell you to do, then you won't get hurt or killed. Now, being a police officer is one of the most dangerous jobs in the country. In an April 2022 interview, criminology professor Alex Vitale, who is the author of The End of the Policing, described the elements of propaganda as this. It takes on many different forms. Now, the most extreme examples are the shows that have historically been essentially co-produced by police departments. This goes back to shows like Dragnet back in the 50s, Adam 12 in the 1960s and 70s, and more recently examples like Cops and Live PD, and that work directly with local police departments who also have veto authority over the content. Now, these shows have been essential to producing certain kinds of narratives about the heroic nature of policing and the unquestionable need for policing in all its many forms. Now, the other distortion is a function of how the entertainment industry works more broadly. The problem is it's more of an issue of the need to produce weekly shows that are filled with action, adventure, and mystery. That formula only works if there are lots of horrible, evil people out there for police to find every week. Now, this distorts reality, and it creates a narrative of, oh my fucking god, the world is so fucking dangerous, and the police are out there catching all the fucking bad guys, and they're all bending and breaking the fucking rules to do it. If they have to rough some fucking people up, if they have to intimidate people in interrogations, if they violate the people's Fourth Amendment rights, well, that's a cost of producing safety. There is, of course, the news industry, and the whole problem of if it bleeds, it leads. Local news has been particularly terrible in terms of crime coverage and exaggerating what is really happening in the community and in the country as a whole. National crime stories came to dominate to local news because they want some horrific crime to cover, and there just weren't any in their local coverage. Finally, the local news media treats the police as completely unassailable and as the front of all truth, which they're not. By the time the real facts have come out, the media have moved on to the next set of horrors to cover, and the public rarely gets the full visual. Now, during his recent State of the Union address, President Biden channeled the propaganda's myths and tenets. Basically, he said, we all want the same thing. We all want our neighborhoods to be free of violence. We all want to earn the we all want the community to trust law enforcement. We all want our children to come home safely. We all want equal protection under the same law, and that's the covenant we have with each other in America. We all know that police officers put their lives on the line every day, and we ask them to do so much. Now, to be counselors, social workers, psychologists responding to drug overdoses, mental health crises, and more. We ask too much of all of them. I know most cops are good, decent people, but they risk their lives every time they put on that shield. Now, what happened to Tyree Nichols? What happened to Tyree Nichols and Memphis was a tragedy, and it happens too often. We have to do better. Now, give law enforcement the training that they need, hold them to higher standards, and help them succeed in keeping everyone safe. We also need more first responders and other professionals to address growing mental health and substance abuse challenges. Now, more resources to reduce violent crime and gun crime, more community intervention programs, and more investments in housing, education, and job training. All this can help prevent violence in the first place. And when police officers or departments violate the public's trust, they need to be held accountable. Now, this was a surreal moment that embodied the absurdities of justice and the color line in America. Now, Tyree Nichols' mother and his stepbrother were the personal guest at President Biden's State of the Union address. Their son was killed by the very system whose tenets the president recited before the nation and the world as they sat there in the audience. In the last few decades, demands for reform have become the immediate talking point that have been summoned up by the country's political leaders and news media after a police officer kills another unarmed black or brown person. Now, the evidence shows, however, that the types of reforms given lip service by the country's mainstream political leaders and other opinion leaders are ineffective at actually stopping police thuggery and brutality. Now, with Obama, it forced new language into the American popular discourse, implicit bias, and it has become a catch-all term for the racism, with its promise that racism and white supremacy and other related beliefs and values are mostly subconscious. The implication, if white people were just made aware of these biases, then racism would disappear from public and private life, which it probably never will. Now, structural and institutional white supremacy and racism are the main impediments to black and brown people's equal life challenges, happiness, and literal life and death existence in America. Now, a focus on implicit bias is an easier solution, and it's a way for diversity and other consultants to make basically lots of money than focusing on the far larger structures and institutions that do the real work of white supremacy and racism in American society and around the world. Now, the public's and the media and the news media and pundit classes' understanding of implicit bias and its implications are, of course, very superficial and mostly incorrect. Now, predictably, implicit bias training is now seen by many well-intentioned people as a way of stopping police thuggery and violence against black and brown people. Now, once again, the research shows that such training is ineffective, and to that point, the University of Washington St. Louis researchers the University of Washington St. Louis researchers basically point this out on their findings. Their findings suggest that diversity training, as it is currently practiced, is unlikely to change any police behavior. The officers who took the training were more knowledgeable about bias and more motivated to address bias at work. However, these effects were fleeting and appeared to have little influence on actual policing behaviors just 1 month after the training session. Now published this February 3rd, the journal Psychological Science, the study evaluates the experiences of 3,764 police officers from departments across the nation who participated in a one-day bias training session provided by the nonprofit Anti-Defamation League. Now, the training produced an immediate and long-lasting understanding of how bias is endured, it delivered only a temporary bump in concerns about bias and in the motivation to use strategies to limit bias in a law enforcement interaction. Educating about implicit bias was effective for durably raising awareness about the existence of subtle or implicit biases, but little else. The study indicates that the current generation of diversity training programs are effective at changing minds, but less consistent at changing behavior. Now, one of the bedrock claims of propaganda is that being a police officer is the most dangerous job in America, which that is true. Now, new data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, as compiled by the And it also shows this to be, again, somewhat of a lie. And now, how they should have worded it is that being a police officer is one of the most dangerous jobs, but it's not the most dangerous. Now, here are some of the most dangerous jobs. Logging, like basically where you chop logs. Of the 100,000 workers that are employed for loggers, there's about 82.5 deaths. There's about 82 deaths a year from logging incidents. Fishing and hunting workers, there's about 75,000 deaths. There's about 75 deaths for them. People that work on roofs, there's about 59 deaths per year. Then you got aircraft pilots and flight engineers, structural iron and steel workers. With the pilots and flight engineers, there's about 48 deaths per year with that type of that job. Then you got structural iron and steel workers. They get about 36 deaths a year. Truck drivers, about 28 deaths per year. The people that go out and they collect your recyclables, they get about, it's called refuse and recyclable material collectors. There's about 28 deaths per 100,000 workers for them. Underground mining machine operators, there's about 26 deaths out of 100,000 workers that they employ. People that work in the construction trade or help in the construction trade, they get about 23 deaths per 100,000 workers. And now electrical power line installers and repairers, and they get about 22 deaths per year. And these beat out the police officers, basically, for being the most dangerous jobs. America's police suffer approximately 13 deaths per year. The median salary for a police officer in 2020 was about $67,000 a year. Now here is another set of facts that are inconvenient for the propaganda narrative. Most police never shoot their guns. Being a police officer in America is, for the most part, remarkably mundane and it largely involves traffic, duty, patrolling, mediating disputes, issuing tickets, assisting with health emergencies, and responding to any crimes committed on another person's property. Now, the best way to understand the power of propaganda and its related myth is to ask a basic fucking question: whose interests are really being served, and who's fulfilling their assigned role? Police serve the state and dominant society by enforcing certain rules and norms, what known as the social order. As such, police are inherently conservative and authoritarian as an institution, and research shows that people with more conservative and authoritarian personalities are attracted to police work. Now, all in all, police and other law enforcement are one of the primary means through which structural violence by the state or the threat of it is enacted on a personal level against the public. And because of America's society as a whole, and a history of the color line and how it intersects all areas of life in society, the above dynamic translates into police targeting black and brown people, a group that is also more likely to be poor and working class, and for violence and abuse. So it is no coincidence that modern policing in America can trace its origins to the antebellum Southern slave-catching patrols. America's police will not stop targeting black and brown communities for thuggery and violence, because that is how the system is designed. White America likes it this way. The basic proof: white America would never allow the police to treat the white people or women, or whatever you want to call it, the same way that they routinely treat routinely treat black and brown people. So if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, REW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of YouTube. And for just a little as a few bucks a video, your donation can help go a long way, and thanks for listening.